Classical music is one of the most popular forms of music available. The works of Mozart, Beethoven, and Bach are still widely viewed around the world. One of the most popular and influential ballads today include The Nutcracker and Swan Lake. And even though these compositions are widely viewed around the world, few people actually know the name Tschaikowsky and associate with the composers who produced these works. So Pyotr Ilyich Tschaikowsky was the second of 6 surviving children between Ilya Tschaikowsky and Alexandra Assyri on April 25, 1840. He began taking piano lessons from a local tutor at the age of 5 and entered the Imperial School of Jurisprudence at the age of 10, where he was educated for 9 years. In 1854, however, his mother died from chloria, and then near his last years in school, his father hired a professional music teacher instead of a local tutor to teach his son. And then he came under the influence of Italian singer Luigi Piccoli and developed a lifelong passion for Italian music at the age of 17. He traveled out of Russia for his first time and visited Germany, France, and Great Britain on the summer of 1861. He began attending music classes offered by the recently founded Russian Musical Society around that time as well. And he was among the first students to attend the St. Petersburg Conservatory in the fall of 1861, and he spent 3 years learning at the conservatory. And he composed his earliest orchestral works titled "The Storm" in 1864 in the observatory. The first performance of "The Storm" took place on August 1865. He graduated the observatory on December 1865. He composed his first symphony, Symphony No. 1 in G minor, in 1866, and his first opera, The Voyevoda, in 1868. He then contemplated marriage to Desiree Artapa, with their engagement ending in failure in the spring of 1868. Then he completed the overture Romeo and Juliet in 1869, as well as Udina. Romeo and Juliet became the first composition to eventually enter the standard international classical repertoire. And then he finished the opera Czech in April 1872 and began working on Symphony No. 2 in C minor, which he completed later that year. The opera Czech was first performed at the Mariinsky Theater in St. Petersburg in April 1874. He wrote Vocula the Smith in 1874 as well, and he also wrote Piano Concerto No. 1 in B flat minor at the end of 1874 as well. It premiered in Boston in October 1875, and he composed Symphony No. 3 in D minor during the summer of 1875. Left Russia near the end of 1875 to go travel in Europe. And he completed Francesca da Rimini in November 1876. Finished Swan Lake in 1876 as well, and it performed on February 20th, 1877. He decided to marry Antonia Miliukova in the summer of 1877, but left her for good on October 6, 1877. He paid her 50 to 100 rubles up to 1881, and the divorce caused him great depression and stress for Tschaikowsky. He then developed a quiet relationship with the Nadezhda von Meck, despite never having met her except for twice on accident. By the end of 1867, their sympathy was expressed through 1,200 letters. He described his experience as being among the most gratifying in his life. He continued his tour through Europe with his brother and Natalie in the beginning of 1878, and he finished his 4th symphony by January 1878. He also completed Eugene Onegin this year as well, but it took a few years to achieve public fame. He then returned to Russia in April 1878 and finished the children's album the same month. He spent the next few months constantly on the move, traveling from Florence to Paris and Clarence in Switzerland, where he began working on the Maid of Orleans. Then traveled back to Russia by the autumn of 1878 and began a second piano concerto. Then traveled to Rome and composed Italian Capriccio in 1880. Then he traveled back to his homeland and completed Serenade for String Orchestra in his homeland. He then began working on the overture the year 1812 in September, and as well as a musical memorial titled The Piano Trio dedicated to Nikolai Rubinstein in December 1881. He began working on a piece inspired by Alexander Pushkin's poem Poltava in 1882, and it performed on Moscow and St. Petersburg on February 1884. Received an official decoration, which is a badge from Alexander III, called the Order of St. Vladimir, which is the fourth class. Then found a manor house in Madanov at the beginning of 1885, then moved there on February 12th. Began the revision of Vakula the Smith, which was to be retitled under the name Tschaikowsky, as well as the new opera titled The Enchantress. He also began working on Manfred, which was first performed on March 11, 1886. Tschaikowsky made a great impression on the audience of Tschaikowsky. However, The Enchantress didn't do as well as the Tschaikowsky at the Mariinsky Theater in St. Petersburg on October 20th, 1887, and quickly withdrew. Then traveled to the Czech Republic and conducted a successful performance of Eugene Onegin there in March 1888. Then began his Fifth Symphony, inspired by the death of Nikolai Kondratov in August 1880, and performed on November 5th, and then retired to Frolowski for 6 weeks in order to work on his ballet titled Sleeping Beauty in December. The first performance of Sleeping Beauty took place on January 3rd, 1890, and eventually gained the approval of Alexander III. Then traveled to Florence on January 14th, 1890, where he began to work on the Queen of Spades, which he completed in mere 44 days. He then received a letter from Nadezh von Meck in September 1890, stating she was on the brink of ruin and unable to continue either his allowance or their correspondence, and this left Tschaikowsky deeply depressed. On December 17th, he attended a very successful production of The Queen of Spades, which motivated him to create his latest opera, Iolanta, as well as his latest ballet, one of which still remains the most popular and respected in history and is widely viewed, called The Nutcracker. He then arrived on America on April 26, 1891, and he even kept a journal of his experiences. Then conducted 6 concerts in America, 4 in New York, 1 in Baltimore, and 1 in Philadelphia. He claimed to have been treated far better in America than in Russia. He finished Iolanta in December 1891 and The Nutcracker in 1892. He wrote The Voyevoda, which was a symphonic ballad, in 1890, but tore up the score on September 1891 despite it being a tremendous success. It was reconstructed after his death. And then conducted Romeo and Juliet in 1892, as well as The Nutcracker, both of which were received with immense approval and joy. He then began working on Symphony No. 6 in B minor, and worked so vigorously that the week after his arrival in Belgium, the first movement was already completed. Then he arrived in Ukraine for a scheduled concert appearance in which he conducted his Second Symphony and The Tempest, as well as the Overture, the year 1812, which surpassed all expectations and left everyone in awe on March 11, 1893. He then sailed for England to formally receive an honorary degree of Doctor in Music from Cambridge University. Then left London in June and set off for Paris, and he read about the death of his sister in a French newspaper. And his friends Karl Albrecht, Konstantin, and Vladimir Shklovsky all died on his way home. He then began working on his third piano concerto in September. On the night of October 20th, 1893, he came home from Leaner's restaurant with an upset stomach, not knowing he had Gloria, the same disease which had killed his mother. His conditions worsened, and he eventually died on 3:15 a.m. on October 25th, 1893, at the age of 53. The composer had officially completed 219 musical pieces, and written 5,374 known letters throughout his lifetime.